What happens when Hollywood's most celebrated actress walks into a late-night talk show thinking she can lecture the host about politics, only to discover she's picked the wrong battle with the wrong person? In just 32 seconds, a single comment about American foreign policy would transform Angelina Jolie from respected guest to public embarrassment, creating one of the most shocking meltdowns in television history. The green room backstage at Real Time with Bill Maher buzzed with the usual pre-show energy. Angelina Jolie sat in the corner chair, her assistant hovering nearby with a phone pressed to her ear. The actress looked confident, almost eager, as she reviewed her talking points on a folded piece of paper. "Miss Jolie, we're ready for you," a production assistant announced, clipboard in hand. She stood gracefully, smoothing down her black blazer. "Thank you. This should be interesting." The studio audience erupted in applause as Bill Maher introduced his guest. "Please welcome Academy Award winner and humanitarian, Angelina Jolie." She walked onto the set with that familiar movie star presence, waving to the crowd before taking her seat across from Maher. The applause died down as the cameras focused in. "Angelina, thanks for being here," Maher began, his tone warm but businesslike. "You've been doing incredible work with refugees around the world. Tell us about your recent trip to Syria." "Thank you for having me, Bill," she replied, settling into her chair with practiced ease. "What I saw there was heartbreaking. Families torn apart by violence, children who haven't seen the inside of a school in years. It's a humanitarian crisis that demands immediate attention." Maher nodded thoughtfully. "And you believe the United States should be doing more?" "Absolutely." Her voice took on an edge of passion. "We have a moral obligation to these people. America has the resources, the capability, and frankly, some responsibility for the situation." "Some responsibility?" Maher raised an eyebrow. "That's a pretty broad statement. Our foreign policy decisions over the past 2 decades have contributed to regional instability," she continued, her confidence growing. "We can't just walk away from the consequences." The host leaned back slightly. "I agree we should help refugees, but you're painting America as the villain here. Don't you think that's a bit unfair?" "I'm not painting anyone as a villain," Angelina replied, though her tone suggested otherwise. "I'm simply stating facts about cause and effect." "Facts?" Maher's voice carried a hint of skepticism. "Or your interpretation of very complex geopolitical situations?" She shifted in her seat, clearly not expecting pushback. "I've spent years on the ground in these regions, Bill. I've seen the impact firsthand. And that's admirable," he acknowledged. "But seeing the aftermath doesn't necessarily make you an expert on the causes. There's a difference between humanitarian work and foreign policy analysis." The audience remained quiet, sensing the tension building between host and guest. Angelina's jaw tightened slightly. "Are you suggesting I don't understand the issues I'm advocating for?" she asked. "I'm suggesting that good intentions and celebrity status don't automatically translate to policy expertise," Maher replied evenly. "There's nothing wrong with admitting the limitations of your knowledge." "My knowledge?" She let out a short laugh. "I've briefed senators, worked with the UN, met with world leaders. I think my knowledge is just fine." Maher paused, studying her face. "Okay, let's test that. You mentioned America's responsibility for Syria. Walk me through the specific policy decisions that you believe led to the current crisis." "Well," she began, then hesitated for just a moment. "The invasion of Iraq destabilized the entire region. Iraq and Syria are different countries, Angelina." "Of course they are," she snapped, irritation creeping into her voice. "But the ripple effects of American interventionism created a power vacuum that allowed groups like ISIS to flourish." "That's one theory," Maher conceded. "But Syria's civil war started during the Arab Spring, largely as a domestic uprising against Assad's regime. How exactly does that connect to American policy?" She fumbled for an answer, her composure beginning to crack. "American support for various rebel groups, the proxy conflicts with Russia. Now you're getting into specifics, which is good," Maher interrupted. "But you just contradicted yourself. First, you said America caused the crisis through intervention. Now you're criticizing our involvement in supporting rebels against a dictator. Which is it?" The studio fell silent, except for the hum of cameras. Angelina's face flushed slightly as she realized she'd been caught in an inconsistency. "I think you're deliberately misinterpreting my points," she said, her voice rising slightly. "I'm not misinterpreting anything," Maher replied calmly. "I'm asking you to clarify your position because it seems contradictory. That's what we do here. We have actual discussions about complex issues. And I'm trying to have that discussion," she shot back. "But you're more interested in playing gotcha journalism than addressing the humanitarian crisis." The host tilted his head, Gotcha journalism? I asked you to explain your own statements. That's called having a conversation. This isn't a conversation, Bill. This is an interrogation, Angelina said, her voice getting sharper. I came here to talk about helping people, not to be cross-examined like I'm on trial. Nobody's putting you on trial, Maher replied, maintaining his steady tone. But when you make sweeping statements about American foreign policy on national television, people deserve to hear the reasoning behind them. She crossed her arms defensively. My reasoning is simple. People are suffering, and America has the power to help them. Why is that so controversial? It's not controversial at all, he said. What's problematic is blaming America for every crisis while simultaneously demanding we fix everything. You can't have it both ways. I never said America was responsible for every crisis, she protested. Actually, you did. 3 minutes ago, you said America has responsibility for the Syrian situation because of our foreign policy decisions over 2 decades. That's a pretty sweeping indictment. Angelina uncrossed her arms and leaned forward. Fine. Let me be more specific. American military interventions in the Middle East have created instability that affects neighboring countries. Is that clear enough for you? Much clearer, thank you. Maher nodded. Now, given that analysis, what's your solution? More intervention or less intervention? She paused, clearly frustrated by the logical corner he was backing her into. Humanitarian intervention is different from military intervention. Different how? One helps people, the other creates more problems, she said, as if the answer were obvious. But humanitarian intervention often requires military protection, Maher pointed out. Aid workers need security. Refugee camps need defending. How do you provide humanitarian aid in active war zones without some form of military presence? The actress shifted uncomfortably in her seat. There are ways to do it through international cooperation, through the UN. The UN that you just criticized for being ineffective? I didn't criticize the UN, she said quickly. Actually, in your interview with CNN last month, you said the UN's response to the refugee crisis was inadequate and bureaucratic. I can pull up the quote if you'd like. Angelina's eyes flashed with anger. So you did your homework just to embarrass me? I did my homework because that's my job, Maher replied. I read what my guests have said publicly so I can have informed discussions with them. Isn't that what you'd want? What I want is to talk about solutions, not play these gotcha games, she snapped. Then let's talk solutions, he said. You've identified problems, blamed various parties, criticized existing institutions. What's your actual plan? She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. The silence stretched for several uncomfortable seconds. I think the plan should be obvious, she finally said. Increase funding for refugee programs, provide more resettlement opportunities, pressure other nations to do their share. Those are good goals, Maher acknowledged. But goals aren't plans. How do you convince Congress to increase funding when you just spent 10 minutes criticizing American foreign policy? How do you pressure other nations when you're simultaneously arguing America should step back from international leadership? You're twisting my words again, she accused. I'm using your exact words, he corrected. Look, Angelina, I respect your humanitarian work. I really do. But you can't come on television, make contradictory statements about complex issues, and then get upset when someone asks for clarification. The audience remained silent, watching the exchange with growing fascination. Some looked uncomfortable, others seemed engaged by the intellectual sparring match. I'm not upset, she said, though her voice suggested otherwise. I'm frustrated by this whole approach. We're talking about human lives, Bill, real people who need help right now. And instead of focusing on that, you want to debate policy minutia. Policy minutia? Maher's eyebrows shot up. You think the details of foreign policy are minutia when you're advocating for major changes in how America engages with the world? That's not what I said. Then what did you say? Because I'm genuinely confused about your position at this point. Angelina took a deep breath, trying to regain her composure. My position is that America should do more to help refugees and should be more thoughtful about the consequences of its actions abroad. Okay, that's reasonable, Maher said. But thoughtful, how? More involvement or less involvement? You keep going back and forth. More thoughtful involvement, she replied, as if that explained everything. What does that mean in practice? Again, silence. She looked around the studio, perhaps hoping for rescue that wasn't coming. I think what it means, she said slowly, is that we need leadership that considers humanitarian impact before making military decisions. So you want America to be more involved in international affairs, not less involved? I want America to be more responsibly involved. And who decides what's responsible? You? The UN that you criticized? European allies who often disagree with each other? Her frustration was becoming more visible by the second. Look, Bill, I didn't come here to design foreign policy. I came here to raise awareness about a humanitarian crisis. But you can't separate the two, Maher pressed. Humanitarian crises and foreign policy are connected. You said so yourself when you blamed American policy for creating instability. Can we please just focus on the human cost of these conflicts? She pleaded. We are focusing on it, he replied. That's exactly why policy details matter. Bad policy creates more human suffering. Good policy can prevent it. So when you advocate for policy changes, the details become life and death issues for the people you say you want to help. The logic of his argument seemed to hit her like a physical blow. She sat back in her chair, clearly realizing she was out of her depth but unwilling to admit it. You know what, Bill? Angelina's voice took on a cold edge. I think you're more interested in showing off how smart you are than actually caring about these issues. The audience shifted uncomfortably. Maher's expression remained calm, but there was a new alertness in his eyes. That's an interesting deflection, he said quietly. When you can't defend your arguments, attack the questioner's motives. I'm not deflecting anything, she shot back. I'm calling out what I see. You invited me here under the pretense of discussing humanitarian work, but really, you just wanted to make me look foolish. Actually, I invited you here because I thought you had something meaningful to say about these issues. I'm starting to wonder if I was wrong. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Angelina's face reddened visibly. Excuse me? She said, her voice rising dangerously. You heard me, Maher replied, his tone still measured. I've given you multiple opportunities to articulate a coherent position on issues you claim to care deeply about. Instead, you've contradicted yourself, blamed everyone but yourself for the confusion, and now you're attacking me personally. I am not attacking you personally, she protested, though her aggressive posture suggested otherwise. Really? Because telling me I don't care about humanitarian issues and that I'm just showing off sounds pretty personal to me. She stood up abruptly, her chair rolling backward. Maybe this was a mistake. Sitting down might be a good idea, Maher suggested calmly. We still have 8 minutes left in the segment. 8 minutes of what? More of your condescending questions designed to make me look stupid? The host remained seated, his body language deliberately non-threatening. Angelina, nobody's trying to make you look stupid. You're doing that all by yourself. The audience gasped audibly. Several people in the front row leaned forward, sensing something was about to explode. How dare you? She hissed, taking a step toward his desk. How dare I what? Ask you to explain your own statements? Expect consistency in your arguments? Hold you to the same standards I'd hold any other guest who comes on television to lecture America about foreign policy? I wasn't lecturing anyone, she said, though her raised voice and pointing finger suggested exactly that. Then what would you call it when you blame American policy for creating Syrian refugees, criticize the UN for being ineffective, demand more humanitarian intervention, oppose military intervention, want America to lead but also to step back, and can't explain how any of these contradictory positions would actually help anyone? The summary of her incoherent position seemed to hit her like a slap. Her mouth opened and closed wordlessly for several seconds. You're putting words in my mouth, she finally managed. I'm using your exact words, Maher replied. Would you like me to play back the tape? This is ridiculous, she snapped. I don't have to sit here and be insulted by some cable television host who thinks he's smarter than everyone else. Some cable television host? Maher's eyebrows rose. You agreed to come on this show, Angelina. Nobody forced you. And if you think I'm just some random cable host, why did you bother coming here at all? She had no answer for that. The logic trap was complete, and she knew it. I came here in good faith to discuss important issues, she said, her voice shaking with anger. No, you came here expecting to be treated like a celebrity, giving a speech to adoring fans. You didn't expect to be challenged on anything you said. Well, this isn't a red carpet interview. It's a political talk show. We actually examine ideas here. Fine, she said, reaching for her microphone. Then examine ideas with someone else. She began unclipping her microphone pack, her hands trembling with rage. You're really going to storm off? Maher asked, sounding almost amused. Because someone asked you to defend your arguments? I'm not storming off, she declared, while literally storming off. I'm choosing not to waste any more time with someone who's clearly more interested in gotcha moments than genuine discussion. The only gotcha moment here, Maher called after her as she headed for the stage exit, is you getting caught not knowing what you're talking about. She spun around one final time. You know what your problem is, Bill? You think being cynical makes you smart. But cynicism isn't wisdom. It's just another form of ignorance. And you think being famous makes you an expert? He replied. But celebrity isn't credibility. It's just another form of privilege. The comeback landed with devastating precision. Angelina stood frozen for a moment, clearly wanting to respond but having nothing left to say. The audience sat in stunned silence, watching one of Hollywood's biggest stars completely lose her composure on live television. Without another word, she turned and walked off the set, her heels clicking loudly in the sudden quiet. The sound of a door slamming echoed from backstage. Maher turned back to the camera, his expression calm and professional despite what had just transpired. "Well," he said with a slight shrug, "I guess we'll go to commercial a little early tonight. When we come back, we'll talk about why it's important to actually understand the issues you're passionate about. Don't go anywhere." As the cameras cut away and the studio lights dimmed for the commercial break, the audience remained seated in shocked silence. They had just witnessed something unprecedented. A major celebrity completely melting down on live television because someone had the audacity to ask her to think critically about her own positions. The green room backstage was reportedly chaos, with Angelina's team scrambling to do damage control while she shouted about being ambushed and disrespected. But there were no ambushes here, no trick questions or unfair tactics. Just a host doing his job and a guest who discovered that fame doesn't protect you from the consequences of intellectual laziness. In 32 seconds of questioning, Bill Maher had exposed what many in Hollywood rarely face: the difference between having opinions and having informed opinions, the difference between caring about issues and understanding them, the difference between using your platform responsibly and using it carelessly. The most shocking part wasn't the meltdown itself, but how easily it could have been avoided. All Angelina had to do was admit she didn't have all the answers, that foreign policy is complex, that her perspective as a humanitarian worker was valuable but limited. Instead, she chose pride over wisdom, defensiveness over honesty, and walked away from what could have been a meaningful conversation about issues she claimed to care about deeply.